red is between the hues rose and orange. Two colors that are opposite from each other on the color wheel are called complementary colors. Two complementary colors are combined, they produce gray. When they're placed side by side, they produce strong visual contrast and appear brighter. And in RGB for the 1, to set red to the max, produce pure red, and 2, we will be making cyan. Like so. Notice that the red and cyan colors are very bright right next to each other. This contrast can be distracting if it's overused. And there's a website I'll be showing you at some point on this coding tutorial journey I'm doing here, which is basically a bit of a meme. It's literally designed using the worst web design principles possible and making everything just terrible. And I will show you that just so you know how bad things can get if you fuck up. And because I find it amusing to poke fun at it. Yes, it's better practice to choose one color as the dominant color and use its complementary color as an accent. First, in the H1 rule, we want to use the RGB function on background color to make cyan. Like that. I don't use cyan very much, so I'm a tiny bit surprised that I remembered which one was cyan, because I forget that stuff quite often, even if they did just tell us. Next, in the 1 CSS rule, we want to set the color to black. And in 2, set it to red. Go. Notice how your eyes are naturally drawn to the red color in the center. When designing a site, you can use this effect to draw attention to important headings, buttons, or links. There are several other important color combinations inside of complementary colors, but that's for later. For now, we set the background color in the 2 class to black. And in the H1 rule, the background color can go away. And now, time to add some other details to these markers, starting with the first one. And they are doing the thing that I said I would do, and changing some class names. I was a little ahead of the curve, I guess, and forgot this was a thing. that done. 2 can become green, and 3 can be blue. We're just updating the classes right now. I'm guessing the next step will actually change the colors to be what they say that they are. A very common way to apply color to an element with CSS is with hexadecimal or hex values. While hex values sound complicated, they're really just another form of RGB values. Hex colors start with a pound character and take 6 characters from 0 to 9 and A to F. The first pair of characters represent red, the second pair represent green, and the third pair represent blue. Okay, yeah, that's an alternative class. That's an alternative thing that you can do for setting the colors. In some ways it's simpler, in some ways it's more complicated. I prefer RGB and another type of color thing that we haven't gone over yet, just because with those there's another concept that you're able to integrate into the color seamlessly, which you can't do with the RGB. Also, I'm just more used to using RGB and the other thing. As simple as. Although, if you ever get given colors in hex and you need RGB or the other way around, there are websites you can find, which I recommend you use because they will shorten the process considerably, that will convert between hex and RGB. If you enter one value, it will give you another. Intensity of green by setting the green value of this color to 7F. There we go. Yeah, if I ever don't have one of those websites at hand and have to manually work out what to do for the hex codes, it's a nightmare. RGB is much easier because I just find guessing the RGB values to be much simpler than the hex values. Yeah, this is the other color model I was talking about, HSL. Hue, saturation, lighting. CSS HSL function accepts 3 values. Number from 0 to 360 for hue, percentage from 0 to 100 for saturation, and a percentage from 0 to 100 for lightness. HSL is definitely a little more convoluted than an RGB, but in some ways it's more flexible, in some ways it's about the same. I've started to use it more lately, but I'm definitely better with RGB, if I'm being totally honest. Now we want to set it to pure blue, so the first number is 240 and set the saturation to 100%. I don't actually know if you have to give it the percent signs or if just the numbers will do. I generally put them in just to be safe. There we go. Learned a few new ways to set flat colors in CSS. You can also use a color transition or gradient on an element. A gradient is when one color transitions into another. The CSS linear gradient function lets you control the direction of the transition along a line and which colors are used. One thing to remember is that the linear gradient function actually creates an image element and is usually paired with the background property, which can accept an image as a value. And the red CSS rule changes the background color property to background. There we go. Yeah, gradients are one thing I've never fully been able to master. Doesn't matter how much I try. I always find them extremely difficult to get my head around and have never understood what I'm supposed to be doing to get the result I'm looking for. Maybe I'll get them one day, but that day has not arrived yet. The linear gradient function is very flexible. It's the basic syntax. The direction of the gradient, the first color, the second color. And yeah, as it says there, you can even apply colors in RGB or HSL within a linear gradient if you want even more flexibility, which is kind of cool. So for this, we want to set that to linear gradient and pass it 90 DEG for degrees. For this, on the other hand, I'm relatively certain you do actually need to give it that degree shorthand, and you can't just say 90. But we'll test that in the next few steps. Okay, and we will use the RGB functions for the colors in here. Makes sense. We want pure red. And then we get to do that. It didn't like that I was trying to prep it for the next step, I guess. I should have seen that coming. I tried to jump the gun in a few places, and that will happen. Okay. We won't see the gradient yet because it needs at least 2 color arguments to work. So we'll give it our second RGB function and set it to pure green. Which it's working now, and I want to test out that thing I was talking about. We'll get rid of the degree and nope, it needs it there. I thought it did, but I wanted to make sure. Yeah, that gradient is pretty nifty looking, ain't it? As you can see, the linear gradient function produced a smooth red-green gradient. While the linear gradient function needs a minimum of 2 color arguments to work, it can accept many color arguments. Use the RGB function to add pure blue as the third argument to the linear gradient. It says it can add many. I don't think I ever researched if there was a hard limit on how many you could add. Probably not, but there's just a limit in terms of your ability to look at it and actually know that's all part of the same function, which could probably get confusing after a while of adding too much stuff in. That and color overload, making it look ugly. Color stops allow you to fine-tune where colors are placed along the gradient line. they are a length unit like